Hello, everybody. Welcome into Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. Every now and then, I like to kind of pop my papers like a newsman, like I'm about ready to read something really, really important.
Maybe I should look at my phone in the middle of and go
right
in the middle of it, so people will think that's breaking recruiting news.
Except around here, we don't read papers. We kind of go off the cuff, and it's a big day for Dog Nation recruiting, at least in terms of the story that we're following. The culmination of one, and maybe in some regards, five-star tight end Arik Gilbert will make his announcement later on. You'll be able to watch that coverage live on the Dog Nation video channels. Obviously, the finalists here, Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, Texas A&M, and LSU. Maybe not all of these finalists necessarily of equal measure. You have reported that he didn't take an official visit, for instance, to Clemson. Georgia did get his last official visit, so kind of interesting to see where all this goes. Jeff, we're going to hear from Ikey Gilbert in just a moment, who is Arik Gilbert's mom. She's obviously been believed to be maybe someone who really liked Georgia in all this. Moms typically like the in-state school. That's not necessarily breaking news when it comes to recruiting. But before we hear her thoughts on where this is going, why don't you set the stage for it yourself? This is a player that, I make no bones about the fact that, I want what's best for Georgia. I believe that Arik Gilbert is what's best for Georgia. At this point in time, my assumption is he's probably not going to UGA. I'll wish him well where he does go. I think he's going to be a really fun player to watch at the college level. That's kind of where I am on all of this. We've obviously talked about him a lot, so maybe now on the day that he makes his decision, where do you want to start with in terms of how you want people to frame this and see this?
Well, I guess let's go for the nuts and bolts of the story first. It's going to be around 620, 612, 624, somewhere in that range, from the College Football Hall of Fame in downtown Atlanta. Nation's number one tight end now. He's now officially rated as a tight end, number 10 overall prospect. Got his offer from Georgia in the summer before his 9th grade year. That was when he was still at Woodward Academy. I would say most in this industry deemed him to be a Georgia lock, maybe even a year ago today. Definitely, 15, 18 months ago today. And now you have a decision coming, and it was one of those where interesting visit pattern. Alabama gets the one in June. Then Texas A&M gets one. That was the weekend of the Georgia-Notre Dame game. And gosh, for Georgia faithful, some of those Dog Nation folks out there, all those Dog Nation folks out there, they sure would have liked to have had him in stands for him to see that game compared to the one he saw against Kentucky. But Georgia gets the final official visit. That was by design. Interesting stuff today we had up on the website today about his mother. But it seems to me like once Gilbert started looking around, his decision process went from, that's the school I feel a little comfortable with, and that's the school I have great experiences and great visits at, the one that makes me want to pop my papers afterward, to where he was looking for a lot more depth from a lot of his other schools, most importantly and chiefly utilization.
So, and that's very interesting, because I want you to hear this clip from Ikey Gilbert where she mentions that in particular, what her son's looking for, the way he'll be used is something you hear her mention right here, and I think that's important. Here's Ikey Gilbert on her son's decision coming up later on this evening.
Core criteria, number one, the school itself, if it felt like the right fit. Also, the football program, his relationship with the coaches, and how he would be utilized within that program.
So when you hear that there at the end, how he will be utilized in that offense, now maybe I'm just sensitive about this as a fan, but it's hard not to take that as coded language about Georgia, because as a lot of people are going to point out, the overall tight end usage comparison between Georgia and Alabama numerically hasn't been all that different, but I believe this ultimately comes down to belief from Gilbert that Alabama just throws it more than Georgia does, and that's true. It's been true since Tua Tagovailoa became Alabama quarterback. So, to me, this comes down to an issue of not which of these two schools use tight ends more, but which of these two schools throw the ball more, and Gilbert wants to catch the ball. When I hear Mrs. Gilbert say that, it's hard not to take that as something that she's heard from her son, as a little bit of a knock against Georgia from a guy that wants to catch the football.
Definitely, he's one of those guys that sees his future as a playmaker with the ball in his hands. The best things about Arik Gilbert, let me take everybody all the way back, is everybody in his world, probably one for all of Dog Nation Daily's views every day. You had $1 for every time somebody has told Arik Gilbert that, man, you should be an outside linebacker. You should be a defensive end. And that way, that's your straightest and truest path to the NFL. And but the heart kind of wants what the heart wants, and he's always wanted to be a playmaker. He's always wanted to have the ball in his hands. He's kind of wanted to be a guy that gets targeted about 6-7 times a game, makes about 4 or 5 catches, and that's what he works for. He works to be one of the best receivers, definitely chiefly one of the best receiving tight ends we've ever seen heading into college football. You just remember Gilbert for the longest time. He was the recruit many years ago. I was always intrigued by him initially, not just the size and the weight, but every time he got an offer, Brandon, he would say something historical about a school, like when Penn State offered him or when Michigan offered him. You could tell he did his Google out before he did his tweet out, and he said something like Michigan with its great tradition and alumni base, or Penn State, and he'd rattle off conference championships and All-Americans. That was always something very neat and very unique about Arik Gilbert right from the jump.
Let me let you hear more of Ikey Gilbert talking about her son's decision. Here is more of her thoughts on kind of where they are as it becomes known to the world a little bit later on this evening.
How would you describe how Georgia and Coach McGee have recruited Arik? Do you think that they have done all they could to put themselves in a position for tomorrow?
I think so. I definitely think so. You got to look at it. We are going back the beginning of his 9th grade year, like summer. That was the first time we met Coach Smart, Coach McGee. So, man, that relationship has been going for 3.5, almost 4 years solid. So, yeah, I think that there's a real bond, there's a real connection, a real respect, that's outside of just football and recruiting.
So, listen, when you hear her talk the way that she does, obviously you come away with that Georgia has done a good job in this recruitment. Now, I still think if Gilbert chooses somewhere else, that's the dog's taking an L in recruiting. I mean, when you recruit a guy like this long, if he chooses somewhere else, you were taking that L on this. But it certainly doesn't come across as something that Georgia necessarily did wrong here as much as it comes across as somebody else kind of slipping in there, and I believe it's going to be Alabama, somebody else kind of stepping in there and maybe making a little bit better pitch, or maybe they made a negative pitch. One way or another, it certainly doesn't seem like Georgia has done anything to hurt its relationship with Gilbert. This, to me, comes across, based on what she says there, assuming that this one goes the way that I think it's going to go later on tonight, but you kind of get the impression from her that it's been more about how others might have swooped in on him kind of here within the last year.
I kind of think it kind of reads like maybe the Jacoby Stevens recruiting story from a few years back. There was a school that came in and kind of, Alabama was the school in this mind where Jacoby Stevens was heavy set on going to Georgia. And then Alabama came in and kind of gave him pause in his thought train there about the Bulldogs. And kind of like a pulling guard, a hole was opened between the connection there between 5-star prospect and likely signee. And that allowed LSU to kind of jump into the fray and end up being the school that he ends up signing with. And in this case, if he does end up going away from the in-state school, I think Tennessee was a school that kind of did that for a little bit. Just caused him to think about usage in Georgia. And maybe not so much as that, but Tennessee was recruiting him as a strict receiver. They said, hey, you're good enough in this conference to be a pure receiver. Forget all this hand in the ground stuff and then flexing you out and making you a Travis Kelce type. Started him thinking that, yeah, I could be a receiver. And I think that kind of changed his recruitment throughout the balance of his decision process, especially over the last year, it seems like to me. And then you talk about, is it an L?
No, it's an L.
But is it an L that's an offset L if Georgia reaps other rewards in the tight end room as well?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of one way you could look at it.
One more from Ikey Gilbert on her, and good of her to spend some time with you to kind of shed some light on the Gilbert family's process here. She's generous with her time and her thoughts to share them. One more from her on kind of where this is going and kind of how it all ends up. Here's a little bit more from Arik Gilbert's mom.
What would you consider to be maybe the best or most real or most memorable part of that official visit?
Probably talking to Coach Coley. He just really kind of emphasized that Georgia was home. And I really think it was a moment that he really started to think about how that would, look for him in the future in regards to staying at home and family being able to come to the game, but not just that, but being able to represent Georgia as an athlete. I think that was probably one of the most memorable moments of the visit.
So you hear more from Akiba Gilbert there. By the way, Jethro Smith in our YouTube comment section asking when the announcement time goes down. 6 p.m. tonight. That one goes down for Arik Gilbert later on.
Couple more things. I saw some comments in the Facebook section comments I want to just address. Number one, people wanted to know, will this be a final decision? Yes, this will be a final decision. There will be no flippage of Arik Gilbert. This family kind of doesn't believe or tolerate that at all. The decision he makes today, I would very likely feel that he adheres to it and keeps that. Another thing that's some news in that story that came out is there's been some waffling on Arik's part and his family's part about whether he was going to be a mid-year enrollee, whether he was going to show up at January with his new team. And he now definitely plans, as of right now, to not go through his entire balance of his senior year in high school at Marietta High School, that he's looking to enroll early in January of 2020.
All right, so with that in mind, it's Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. It's great to have all of you with us. Let me also thank our friends at Kroger to remind you as we head towards Halloween next week and big fall season after that with Thanksgiving, the pumpkin flavors are back. And by the way, it finally feels like fall weather, feels like a great chance to enjoy all this. I'm talking about pumpkin spice coffee, pumpkin pies, even pumpkin scented candles. You can get all that for you at your local Kroger. Really excited about that. We're actually excited about being at a Kroger location live next week, the brand new Kroger on Ponce, as a part of a great day. That's a week from today on Wednesday, October 30th. We're going to be there at the 725 Ponce de Leon Avenue in Atlanta location from 3 to 4 p.m. next Wednesday for Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. So regular time for us, regular stuff. We'll be going down there at that time.
So, Brennan, even though the graphic does say 4 p.m. on Wednesday, we will be broadcasting live at 3 p.m., though, correct?
My understanding is we will be doing the show at the normal time from 3 to 4 p.m. next week. The brand new Kroger on Ponce, a beautiful, beautiful facility. This is really good stuff. We'll look forward to seeing all of you there for that. Now, let me stay on the subject of tight ends. Before we get to top targets, let me stay on the subject of tight ends just for a moment and talk about another tight end that Georgia has made some inroads with. As Jeff Sentell will explain, this has kind of been going on, for a long time, even though he hasn't been the hottest topic necessarily on shows like Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger or Dog Nation Daily. Mikey Henderson, the Oklahoma commit, who's played a lot of quarterback at the high school level, but the college level has always kind of been, we talk about Arik Gilbert potentially being kind of a flex-in type guy, a tight end who could play wide receiver. That may be a bit of a way that you would describe Mikey Henderson there as well, Mikey Henderson Jr., as he likes to be known. And apparently Georgia has made a strong enough connection with him that despite the fact that he's an Oklahoma commit, Henderson has said, as of right now, there's really no school that's necessarily ahead for him. Here is more of what Mikey Henderson Jr. has told Jeff Sentell.
They both recruit me hard. There's no lead in that. They both recruit me hard. I hear from them every day.
You want to figure it out when?
Like, I've already talked to OU about my concerns with the offense, and they know how I feel about Georgia. So, I was talking to them about it. So they want me to come up there again and sit in the film room with them. So I'll probably have another visit to Oklahoma, maybe one more, and then a decision will be made by in the month of November.
So certainly pretty interesting to hear him speak of where his relationship stands with Georgia right now, even though he's an Oklahoma commitment. I guess, would you mind going a little bit more detail about exactly what it is that Georgia's been able to do? And he mentioned some concerns about Oklahoma, kind of what that's about. Would you mind just giving a little extra detail to what Henderson tells us about there?
Yeah, first of all, let's go in the 1 foot level, surface level, top of the water look at this story. No relation to Mikey Henderson, the guy that caught that touchdown pass in Tuscaloosa that made Brandon Adams dance the jig wherever he was in 2000.
I was at Bryant-Denny Stadium in 2007. As Jeff said, though, this is not the same Mikey Henderson.
Not the same Mikey Henderson. That would make Mikey Henderson's offspring maybe he would have had him when he was 11, I think, or something like that, 11 years ago. So this is a guy, funny, he says they're really close right now, Brandon. Mm-hmm. If there is a match race right now, Oklahoma's in the lead because he's still committed to Oklahoma, but Georgia is right there, maybe a yard behind, right on the Sooners' hip. I think it comes down to he's not going to take any other visits. It's just Georgia and Oklahoma. He might go back to Oklahoma, because he has some concerns, which I know we'll get into in a second. But Oklahoma views him as an H-back. And that's one thing Georgia's not recruiting anybody as. They're not recruiting anybody as an H-back. And I dare say in that Lincoln Riley offense, if you got to cover all those receivers and then worry about the back, I think the H-back's not getting a lot of traction whatsoever, especially from defensive coordinators. But he's just looking, and one of the things we spoke about, Brennan, we wrote about this yesterday on the website, is Oklahoma to him is like that stone-cold, smoking hot fox that he's always wanted to go out with.
Okay.
And he's always wanted to think, man, it'd be great to date her. But then Georgia's kind of looming now as the one that he feels like would be a better fit, that he has more fun with, the one that might be a better long-term relationship. So he's got some thinking to do, and he also wants to hear a little bit more from Oklahoma now.
Well, speaking of what he's heard from Georgia, Mikey Henderson was good enough to tell us a little bit more about what the message from the Dogs has been. Here is Henderson on that topic.
They just told me take my time with this decision. Georgia, a great place for me. And those their final words. When I left, I knew how they felt about me. So that was the main thing for them.
What do you think would be the biggest reason why
I think the biggest reason would be why is just sitting down in that film room, talking to Coach Smart, and just how much of a priority I am to them. The situation in their tight end room next year, I know the situation it'll be. And I feel like it'll be a great opportunity for me to come in, get on the field early. And there's a lot of positions where you can't come to Georgia and get on the field early. But I feel like tight end is one of their tight end room, and they told me that. And, they pulled the depth chart up, and they got stuff to back it up, too. So I just feel like that would be the main reason, just the situation and the opportunity.
So certainly when you hear Henderson talk there, he clearly feels that Georgia has made him a priority. And I know that in a day and age in which Georgia is aggressively recruiting as many players as it can at every position, and Henderson's kind of getting down to the wire of when he wants to make his final decision by, that feeling of this school has let it be known they really want me, that really matters, doesn't it?
It does, and I mean, folks, I know you're going to look at that and start thinking, okay, Gilbert, Theo Johnson, Darnell Washington. This guy, this is his first year playing wide receiver. First of all, he is a stout, explosive athlete. That 370-pound power clean he's got right now, he's got eyes on going over 400 his freshman year in college. That's the top 1 percentile of strong, grown men in high school football. His bench is over 350 pounds. He's got a 540-pound squat. You look at his senior film, and he's developing into a guy that will be nasty and maul folks in the run game. But also what he's going to do is he's going to go downfield and be a very effective red zone weapon, winning a lot of jump balls, going up and elevating, and winning a lot of balls, catching those balls at his peak and bringing them down in contested catches.
Yeah, exactly right. Now, more from Michael Henderson, because you did a great job of asking him, okay, so about those other tight ends, because Henderson's obviously said he feels like he's a priority, but if you even push Arik Gilbert to the side for a moment, there has still been a lot of talk about Darnell Washington. There's been kind of an endless degree of discussion about Theo Johnson here as well. I loved the way that you posed the question to him as a way of kind of getting more information about the situation of how he fits into the scenario that already includes, at least in terms of recruiting interest, Washington Johnson too, before you even get to what may have gone down with Arik Gilbert. Here is Michael Henderson taking that topic head on. Pretty interesting stuff here.
They're going after Darnell, they're going after Theo. Is it almost like first two that want in? How do they address the other big dogs they're recruiting at tight end too?
Oh, I mean, it's no secret. I know who they recruiting at tight end and the other guys, but I guess they like all of us, so they'll be happy with whoever they land. And I feel like, I don't know what they're sending them other guys, but I feel like a priority. I talk to Coach Smart, I talk to Coach Hartley, and they tell me when I'm ready to make that decision, I can. So I know. Maybe it may be, I don't know. It may be a first come, first serve thing. So
I think it's very interesting. Obviously, he makes it be known the way that everybody else does that Georgia has recruited other tight end prospects, and yet he also feels confident that he's one of the ones that they want as much as anybody else. And then going on to say, but maybe this is the possibility that this is a first come, first serve deal for the two tight ends. We know Todd Hartley wants this class because he's tweeted out the dream team type stuff, the double pairing type stuff before. where do you come down on that, Jeff? Is this more likely to be, hey, if Theo wants it first, he gets it. If Michael Henderson wants it first, he gets it. Or is there something more complicated than that going on behind the scenes?
Well, Brendan, I know how you think, and you heard him say something like by the end of November, and by the end of November, lots of things might be resolved by then. Arik Gilbert's decision will be resolved. Theo Johnson's decision will likely be resolved, and that's about the same time when Mikey Henderson Jr. wants to make his decision known as well, or his final decision. It's always unique in this day and age when you're talking about a prospect who was committed to a certain school, taking, I think, upwards of 10 visits there at least, and he was saying, I'd like to go to the Army All-American Bowl, well, the All-American Bowl now, formerly the Army All-American Bowl, and make my final decision, or make my decision then. And it's always kind of head-scratching to go, okay, hold on, you're currently committed right now. But, Henderson's a guy, really well-spoken kid, has a lot of value. For those that wonder about how he might fit in the Georgia offense and playmakers and stuff like that, I think a nice little benchmark or a check-down thread of logic here is this guy's good enough for Lincoln Riley to see a way to put him into his offense. And that's something that, Georgia fans that want to see more explosivity, more multiple threats in their vertical passing game, something to consider there with Mikey Henderson Jr. as well.
John West on Facebook says that he'd be very happy if Georgia got Washington and Henderson, so he likes what he's heard there from Michael Henderson. Would love to pair him with Darnell Washington, who Georgia fans certainly hope that they get as a member of this 2020 class, another one of these five-star prospects at that tight end position. Let's talk more about Washington and others now as we transition to our top targets. We'll run through these and kind of give you the latest kind of bullet point soundbite on each of these guys as it relates to what the future of the 2020 class looks like for the Georgia Bulldogs. In fact, let's start near the top where we have, kind of for a while now, Kelee Ringo, that top target. Obviously, there was a lot of chatter coming off Ringo's visit to Oregon. That really continued for most of last week. A lot of social media behavior from both he and his mom about that. I have a tendency to believe that these things kind of die down over time, that visit highs kind of wear off. Is that Eugene, Oregon visit high going to eventually wear off for Kelee Ringo?
Yeah, so you think he's going to take another official very shortly to Texas. There should be some of those similar feelings right there. Very interesting. I don't know if it's going to make our online chatter this week, but Kelee Ringo also tweeted out that he would like some help with an editor and some highlights, trying to put together something. Now, he's already putting together his top 5, Brandon. I don't know if he's going to go down to a top 3 or, I'm sure the Dog Nation zealot would sit there and go, I wonder if he is a reverse the momentum type candidate recruit. I don't think it's at that stage right now for Kelee Ringo. Sorry to rain on everybody's thought train right there.
How about name number 2, top targets of the class of 2020, just below Kelee Ringo. In the second position is Noah Sewell, the 5-star linebacker from Orem, Utah. Trenton Simpson, the one-time Georgia recruiting target, does decommit from Auburn this week. But as you've explained, Jeff, Georgia's so far down the road with Sewell. His placement here, number 2 on our list, would lead you to believe at this point in time the availability of any other linebackers probably won't do a whole lot to sway Georgia, whether that be Justin Flo taking a UGA visit. I'm speculating here, but that's my assumption. Or Trenton Simpson being back on the market. It certainly seems like Georgia has prioritized Sewell at that position for this class.
Yeah, it's funny. You mentioned Justin Flo, and the reporting out there has that Justin Flo is going to take an official visit to Georgia in November. Going to do a lot of back-to-backs there. Oddly, the discriminating or the dedicated before the Hedges viewer will wonder, he's not in the top targets. He's never been in the top targets, and he's not even in the Brandon's Clark County phone book section of our top targets as well. And I just have good reasons to think that there are a lot of prospects that take 5 visits to take their 5 visits. And I think Justin Flo is a guy that's not the archetype, the prototype, the priority, where Georgia's kind of, to borrow a Clemson Dabo Sweeney phrase, I think Clemson is all in on Justin Flo, and I think Georgia is all in on Noah Sewell.
So 2 defensive names are our top targets for the class of 2020. How about name number 3 on that list? Now we get to a Darnell Washington, the 5-star tight end, very high in his placement, a guy who's had some unusual tweets here and there, but for the most part has remained pretty steadfast. At least the belief has been steadfast in his feelings about Georgia. This is one of the uncommitted players, Jeff, at the time that most Georgia fans feel the most confident eventually landing at UGA? Do they have justifiable reasons to feel that way?
Yeah, a couple things. There's always so many candidates for our online chatter, Brandon. One of the things that came up this week, and I don't know if we have it in our production queue, those fellas do such a good job with that, but there was an Instagram story, 2 Instagram stories this week of relevance with Darnell Washington, and I know you're ready to jump them out and spill them out because you're all about that.
Well, no, people send me this Instagram stuff. They send me these screen grabs. I saw something he said about Gilbert or something like that.
So there was one grab where he discussed that. I don't know what folks are saying about that, that Arik Gilbert and Darnell Washington don't want to play together. He said, I'd want to play with him. I don't know where it comes from.
Yeah.
I think he had an appropriate emoji there.
Somebody sent that one to me. I've seen that one.
And the other one about Darnell Washington is he was doing a, I think it was an Instagram chat. He just went live and he had a Georgia gear on. And then the friend that was in this, looked like front seat of his car, also had Georgia gear on as well.
Wow.
And you know how I feel about gear? I think gear can be a false positive, but when you have the gear and then your friend has the gear, and yet Darnell Washington also seems to be throwing up more smoke and mirrors than that old Spy Hunter video game from my era.
Boy, I used to love Spy Hunter.
Where they would oil slick, smoke screen, and all that stuff.
Game. One of my favorite 80s era video games.
But he's reached out to, I think, Clemson, about Clemson coaches wanting to know when they're going to recruit him, and then he's done this for Oklahoma this week as well, reaching out. Seems like a lot of smoke and mirrors are there with the Darnell Washington recruitment.
Yeah, very interesting to pay attention to, but high on our list for right now. Name number 4, top targets for the class of 2020. How about Jordan Burch out of Columbia, South Carolina? He was in town for the loss to the Gamecocks for the other day. Does that cause any problems in his recruitment?
Actually, Brandon, I think that's a visit that we will look back on with Jordan Burch and think that was a positive visit for Georgia and Jordan Burch, especially from the defensive side of the ball. You had a stout defensive effort where the offense kept turning the ball over and forcing the defense into pressure positions, and the defense responded. I think the main thing we should always discuss here when we talk about Jordan Burch is the fact that Georgia will be losing so many defensive linemen this year and next year. You know, throw the name Malik Herring is there as well. One of the guys that's starting and playing well for Georgia week to week that nobody ever talks about is Malik Herring. Malik Herring is quietly putting together a lot of consecutive starts there for Georgia on the defensive line. And he's going to have the body frame, Brandon. He's going to have the 6'5", the 270, the wheels, the spin, the agility, lateral movement to really impress a lot of NFL scouts too.
So can we call a timeout on our top targets for 1 second? Because I want to address Brian Roche's comment in the Facebook comment section. We'll get back to top target in a second. I got to deal with Brian Roche on this. He says, why are y'all going to go live with the Arik Gilbert announcement tonight if he's going to another school? It seems like a waste of money and time. So here's the thing, Brian. I don't mind being completely honest with you. My pick tonight, my prediction would be that Gilbert's going to choose somewhere else. But we sat here in this studio last year. It was actually a different studio then, but we sat in our Dog Nation World Headquarters studios a year ago with me 100% sure that DJ Daniel was coming to Georgia, and he announced South Carolina on that particular day. Now, he eventually flipped to Georgia, but we've been surprised before. When you went to Monty Rice's commitment ceremony, when it was LSU, Auburn, and Georgia on the table, the one where he initially chose LSU, I would imagine the entire recruiting industry was surprised at that. So I'm not going to tell you to get your hopes up. I'm not going to tell you that that I believe it's going to be Georgia. I think it's a pretty slim chance that he chooses UGA. But there's a reason why everybody watches these recruitment announcements, because you kind of never know until it's over with.
Yeah, you know, I first of all, I'm thankful for every viewer, and I don't want to do anything to disparage anybody, but hold on, here's what I feel. Our job is to cover Georgia recruiting. Our job is to cover the recruiting of the University of Georgia. And no matter which way folks think he's going to go, and they have the information that tells them and their sources about where he's going to go, we still got to cover the story, and this is a significant recruit for the University of Georgia. I, for one, don't want everybody to think, well, Dog Nation and Jeff is not there, so that's my key. That's the crystal ball that he's not going anywhere. Sometimes me being a reporter and not just a guy that throws up articles to get clickbait and journalism and stuff like that, sometimes the bigger story when you cover Georgia recruiting is not why they chose Georgia, but why they didn't choose Georgia, because that resonates and that's credible in this sphere as well.
Plus, the practical reality is it's just down the road. If you lived in Tacoma, Washington, we're probably not going.
Orem, Utah, sir?
No, that might be a little bit different situation for a little bit different scenario. All right, back to top targets. Next name on the list. Where we at? Number 5 on the list here now. Following up on Jordan Burch, the number 5 name, Zykevius Walker from Sly County, Georgia. And boy, it seems like there's been, maybe this is just my impression of this, seems like there's been a lot of movement between Walker and Georgia as of late.
There has, and I think you're going to see him continue to take more visits. Again, here's the question for me and Zykevius. Will he make his decision known before he takes all of his visits? Or will he leave a visit parked for that will be the school he visits after he is committed to that school? Mm-hmm. That's something to watch there with Zykevius Walker.
Yeah, I think it's a defensive line name that is certainly pretty impressive, and one of those few in-state guys still on the board for Georgia for the class of 2020. So we'll watch that and see where that goes. Next name on the list, top target, number 6 here, coming in after Zykevius Walker. Let's move on and take a look at Theo Johnson, who's still pretty high on this list out of Ontario. A lot of Big Ten action for him. I know there's been the Iowa official visit as of late. Was he at Penn State for the Michigan game? Am I making that up?
Had a Penn State official. Yeah, Penn State official. He's just off the heels of his Penn State official. And remember, folks, this is what we told you about a long time ago. His walk was going to be rapid fire. It was going to be some Georgia, Notre Dame. It was going to be an unofficial one-day trip to Iowa. Then it would be trips to Michigan, trips to Penn State. Was he going to sneak in a late official visit to Alabama? One thing, Brandon, I know that has not went through your calculating recruiting CSI mind would be the decision made today by Arik Gilbert. Would that give him pause about taking future official visits? Remember, Theo Johnson told us one of the potential final official visits he might take would be to Alabama as well.
Yeah.
I wonder, should Alabama get fantastic news from Arik Gilbert today, whether they will continue their heightened pursuit of Theo Johnson.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. It'll be worth watching and seeing where that goes. After Theo Johnson, top targets for the class of 2020. Let's roll on, take a look at our next name there. Dante Manning, the defensive back out of Kansas City. Jeff, you had a good report on him at DogNation.com recently. I know a lot of folks have had a chance to read that. I hope everybody goes to the site and reads the entirety of the article for themselves. But you want to give us a little bit of a thumbnail sketch on Manning at the moment?
Yeah, he reminds me of, for some reason, he reminds me of Richard LeCount a lot. The way he acts, the way he walks. I mean, we wrote a very personal story about him because this guy does things a little bit differently than other recruits. He has told Georgia he has parked a prime December official visit lane for Georgia to get an official visit. They've been recruiting him since his sophomore year. Gosh, he is a fantastic, splendid football player, 10.67 in the 100. He's an Under Armour All-American. You look at his plays, Brandon, they're on offense, defense, special teams. Talks to Kirby Smart the most weekly. Just about every week he's talking to Kirby Smart. And when he talks to the head man of Georgia, Kirby Smart, who very rarely brings up player parallels, at least in my reporting of his recruiting time at Georgia, dropped the name Jalen Ramsey to describe what he sees out of the way that Dante Manning plays football. And I know all you Falcon fans out there, you saw how a rusty Jalen Ramsey did with Julio Jones last week.
So if that means that Dante Manning's going to one day be shutting down future Alabama wide receivers in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, then I am all on board for that.
He's a good kid.
Sign me up for that.
He's one of those kids that I talk to him, I watch his film. I've been talking to him for like maybe about a month to 2 months now. He seems to me like a guy that I will follow. And folks, there are players in different parts of the country that didn't end up choosing Georgia, but you get to know them on the recruiting trail, and you surely hope to see them do well and prosper. And Dante Manning, whether he shows up in red and black or crimson and cream, another Georgia-Oklahoma battle here, which is what it sounds like to the end. Dante is, he told us maybe 6 weeks ago that Georgia was going to get one of his final officials. He's already taken one to Oklahoma. He's already taken one to Texas A&M. The other schools here which will get officials, Oregon, another school that's somehow popping up a lot with intersecting recruiting paths with Georgia. And the other one would be some forks up action, I guess, with Arizona State and those Sun Devils.
Yeah, there you go. Next name, top targets, the class of 2020. Now making an appearance on our top targets list for the first time and showing up in a pretty nice spot at number 8, Mikey Henderson Jr. We've pretty well talked about him, Jeff, the young man out of Carrollton, Texas. Anything you want to add to this?
Stout young man, great communicator. I think he wants to be in broadcasting, and he's certainly got the chops for that. Look at the plays right here. He was a quarterback in this film, and he still thinks he can chuck that pigskin Napoleon Dynamite style about 60, 65 yards.
Trick plays.
And you imagine a reverse post when you throw it out there on a screen and then throw it downfield. That would be the definition of explosivity in the Georgia offense. Some razzle-dazzle.
At this point, I'd settle just for a post.
Brandon, it'd be like some
I'm kidding.
Some pop rocks to the Georgia offense. Mikey Henderson, that's guys emerging now for Georgia as a tight end or as a BPA late in the game.
What does BPA stand for?
Best player available.
There you go. Yeah, very good stuff. All right, we still got 10 names on this list this week?
We still got 10 names.
All right, let's do number 9, top targets class of 2020 after Mikey Henderson. Arian Smith still on here but dropping. I will admit that I've been kind of curious where things kind of stand with Smith. Henderson takes the lead in front of him. Anything new on Arian to offer?
Clemson has offered, which was going to make this a Georgia, Clemson, Rocky Balboa, Apollo Creed type fight. Still hasn't established a public official visit yet to Georgia. Likely to happen for the Texas A&M or Missouri game. His buddy Matthew Bowling there will definitely be a part of that from UGA track. Something to watch for there. Henderson, I need to see him take another visit, an official visit, which I'm pretty sure that he'll give to Georgia before he starts vectoring back up the charts here.
Final name, top target name number 10 on our top targets list here on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. And for old time's sake, there he is one more time, Arik Gilbert. That name may be burned into our screen. We have a monitor in our studio where we kind of keep up with all this on. The Gilbert name may be burned into our screen. It's going to be a little sad not seeing that name on this list one way or another next week.
Next week, it will not be on this list one way or another, and now that we've completed our top 10.
Because I will say this, and I don't mean to cut you off, Connor Riley did something really good in our Dog Nation forum a few weeks ago where he looked at the first top targets that we ever did on the 2020 recruiting cycle compared to what they were as of the most recent time that had been done. Gilbert was one of the few names that was kind of on from the beginning. So Gilbert's been here for a while, man.
Breezy was there. Milton was there.
We don't have to go back through a lot of these. Some of these aren't exactly the most pleasant memories.
So my most pleasant memory of our top targets is Brandon got so ornery with a viewpoint where he wanted to talk about it immediately that you took a 20-second timeout in the middle of your top target, sir.
That's
a Hedges first right there.
Well, you just want to, kind of respond to the people, be kind of in the moment here. So, Gilbert, we'll see where that goes later on this evening. Live Dog Nation video channel coverage of the announcement coming up at 6 p.m. tonight. Look forward to doing that with you. Also, there you go. You see the finalist. He's going to be going down 6 p.m. tonight. We'll be able to do all that. Decision time around 6:15 or so. So, should be a fun thing. And listen, I love the drama of a commitment decision. And obviously, I'm hopeful that the good news comes to the Dogs. But you will have to see where this one goes. Let me show you some of the guys that just missed out on making our top targets list here this week. So Tank Bigsby still here, Don Chaney still here, Jaquarius Conley, the safety still here, Ashad Johnson, the high school teammate of Cedric Von Prawn still on here. Still got the quarterback on here, Jane DeLaura. So basically the same list as last week.
I think there's one other name. I don't know if it made it, but Brandon, you'll notice who's not on your top targets list this week that belongs in the Clark County phone book section, which is what I continue to call it. And that
Marshawn Lloyd?
That would be the 5-star running back out of North Shore, Texas.
So you don't think Zachary Evans even on this thing at all anymore?
No, he should be on the.
Oh, he should be on the whatchamacallits. Well, there you go.
The whatchamacallits.
Somebody
give Brandon Adams a whatchamacallit candy bar for.
Listen, that's a classic Larry Munsonism. Saved our whatchamacallits. I feel like he said that a few times.
Classic Munsonism.
Anything to say about the guys that just missed the top 10?
The list is going to get shrinking. You got
Jay Squilla says predicting Evans is an exercise in futility. I'd agree with Jay on that.
Predicting anything with Evans is going to be very hard to shoot par on that course right there. And, next week's show, the one thing to bring up, are you feeling a costume next week, sir, at the Kroger on Ponce de Leon? What
I don't know. Maybe so. I don't have one, but maybe
folks,
so.
let Brandon know if you want to see him in costume.
Yeah, maybe we'll do that. You never know. I wouldn't mind doing it. I just don't have a costume. So we'll have to see how it goes.
Well, there's a service. We don't give away free plugs, but they have shipping in a prime way to get it to you really fast.
Man, I'm not spending a bunch of money on a Halloween costume, but we'll see.
Spins that thing, sir.
All right, it's Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. Speaking of our friends at Kroger and speaking of getting ready for Halloween, this time of year also means a transition to flu season as well. Now, Halloween is fun with the candy and the decorations and the costumes, flu season not, but Kroger can make it better because they've got you covered for flu vaccinations. You can get one with no appointment, and you can also get one for a copay as low as $0. That's serious savings, and that's great stuff from Kroger. To find out more, check out this website, Kroger.com/flu. That's Kroger.com/flu. Jeff has got weekly six-pack coming up. We'll do some trivia here in just a moment. Also, let's kind of take some time to kind of look at what's been said online. We call it our online chatter. That's kind of a mockery of me because that's a phrase I like to use a lot when I'm talking to Jeff about the recruiting stuff. So, Jeff, a little bit of online chatter this week to kind of fill in more of the gaps about what's currently going on with UGA recruiting. And this is certainly appropriate this week given the fact that Georgia is on a bye and not playing on Saturday.
Lots of online chatter. Let's jump right into it. And Brandon, I know you like the online chatters.
I do. I love it.
With highlights, especially top target highlights.
My favorite.
Let's jump right into those. I think we've got a 5-star leading off of our online chatter spree, and it's a name you're going to know.
Oh, is this Caleb Williams
Look
right
at
here?
Caleb Williams. This is against DeMatha, a huge rivalry, a Georgia-Florida type rivalry in DC football. And look at that. Escapes contained.
Look at that escape. Wow.
Shifts. And Brandon, is he going to walk all the way up that sideline for 80 yards?
Look at this. Caleb Williams, my gosh. Now, the run is impressive, but the escape that he shows back there in the backfield even more impressive than that. I also liked it this week. I saw Caleb Williams kind of interacting with the SEC Network Twitter handle about some stats they'd shown about the SEC. So this is a young man that even though he's been rumored to a bunch of different places, including his, I wouldn't even get on all the places he's been rumored to, showing a little love to the SEC Network makes you feel better if you're a Georgia fan. That's a fun quarterback prospect right there.
Yeah, here's what he did, guys, to give you perfect, vivid recall of Brandon's thought there. There was a tweet from the SEC Network that talked about 5 top 10 teams and how many times that's been done in history. That's the 20th time in the history of the AP poll that the SEC has had 5 out of the top 10 teams. No other conference in the country has even done it one time. And that drew out the from one young Caleb Williams.
How about our next piece of online chatter?
Brandon, it's going to be another playmaker here. We wrote about Carson Beck. We went on DogNation.com last Friday to kind of really go into detail about, is he struggling? What's the deal there? Well, Carson Beck, after that story, he had a Friday night on ESPNU, Brandon. He throws 5 touchdown passes, leads his team against Sandalwood, which is led by FSU commit Jeff Sims. Showed a lot of poise in the pocket. Didn't throw a lot of passes where he put his team up for losing a possession.
Yeah.
A lot of those throws were in the red zone area, and also Brandon, he showed a little bit more of that wiggle, a little bit more of that he does yoga all the time, athletic ability and flexibility.
What I like about Beck is he's got a really easy release. It doesn't look like he's putting a lot of effort in getting rid of the football. So he's got, in baseball, they would call that easy gas. He's got kind of an easy gas to his delivery here in terms of getting rid of the football there. I love to watch him the way he throws the ball, not afraid to kind of throw into coverage a little bit because he trusts his accuracy. I like watching Beck throw it.
5-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. Did it in a primetime stage. Did it under a senior season where a lot of Dog fans were asking this intrepid reporter on the Dog Nation forum, what's up with Carson Beck? Well, what's up right now with Carson Beck is that stock is way up with Carson Beck, playing some great football over his last 3 or 4 games.
How about the next piece of online chatter to get to?
Let's look west, young man.
Ooh, look at this.
There's Corey Wren taking a punt. I think he's got 12 touchdowns all-purpose already through this season. Look at the gas. That's from Fox 8, the local affiliate in New Orleans.
What kind of competition is he playing against?
John Curtis is very good competition, Brandon. It's going to play some of the best teams in Louisiana. That is a Valdosta High type program in the state of Louisiana, a well-respected name. And when you see Corey Wren right there, Brandon, does it give you those Wayne's World punt returner going through your mind right now? Another burner like a Miko Hardman or a Akeel Crumpton?
Oh, yeah, a little bit. And although it's a different body type, the way that he uses that kind of put his toe in the dirt and making a guy miss, much different body type. It reminds me of some of the same videos we used to watch about Dominic Blaylock a year ago. Blaylock, a little bit different build, but in terms of the way that he's just using his body to make guys miss, brings back some of that Blaylock vibe a little bit too. A guy that's not really catching a lot of balls at his high school right now because of the offense they run, but a guy that wants to come to Georgia, play the receiver position. UGA needs more speed at that position. Obviously, Wren's got that to burn.
So I'm going to say this. This is, as far as predictions go, Brandon, you might rate this as a 3 or 4 foot putt, just outside gimme range. But Corey Wren is going to be a factor in the special teams kick return game early at the University of Georgia.
Any more online chatter to get to?
Got some more.
All right, let's do it.
How do you like looking at Keely Ringo, man, making plays on offense? And Brandon, no Sean Marino moment coming up right here.
Look at that. Nice leap. Nicely. But Ringo on offense is really fun because he gets a chance to show off his athleticism. I'm imagining the defensive side of the ball, not a lot of teams throwing it to him right now. So our best chance of seeing highlights from Keeley is on offense. And you like the leap situation here. Pretty impressive. Fits in with a lot of the Georgia guys who've made habits of doing this in recent years. Love to see that from Keeley.
Ringo, now we're looking at 1 5-star in the 2020 potential class for Georgia, at least in the 2020 cycle. Let's look at another 5-star who continues, despite what the 24/7 Sports composite ratings like to tell us. We've got one Kendall Milton making a lot of big plays last weekend. Okay, I'm gonna just say this: Kendall Milton made a lot of big plays. He had a catch, Bill Walsh style. Catch and run, caught a flare pass, took it to the house, had another pass, took it to the house. Again, Kendall Milton continues to display burst, but also it takes a lot of jerseys from the other side to bring him down.
I know that we talked about this in Dog Nation Daily earlier this week, but for the audience who may not have had a chance to see that or hear that, what do you make of the fact that Milton now not a composite 5-star? I've had my piece and said my piece on this. What do you make of that?
Much ado about nothing. Maybe I think the one of the better terms that came out of the Dog Nation forum was he got belaylocked. His performance is not indicative of a drop in rating status. I think that has a lot to do with him missing some earlier games this year. Also, the fact that this is not a contested recruitment. He will be in Athens in 2.5 months. His father even tweeted out something this morning about hard to believe that he will be packing up his son in 2.5 months to drop him off in Athens, Georgia.
It's funny how fast all this goes. It goes by fast for me watching these kids grow and develop. I can only imagine how much fast it goes by for the parents who've actually been there every step of the way, even dating back to their own birth. You know, I can only imagine how sped up this entire process must feel to them.
There's your online chatter, sir. Lots of big plays made by potential Georgia Bulldogs and future Georgia Bulldogs.
All right, a lot of your comments coming as we go. Hurry up here in just a couple of minutes. This is Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. By the way, speaking of our friends at Kroger, before we get Jeff and the six-pack trivia, let me also remind you about Halloween coming up. You can save on everything from home decor, costumes, and spooktacular sweets. Kroger's even got great savings on Hershey's, assorted sweet tarts, and so much more. Download the Kroger app, go to Kroger.com, or just make sure you get the Kroger Plus card. Take advantage of those great savings. And don't forget, day before Halloween next week, Jeff and I live there at the brand new Kroger location on Ponce, the beautiful area, revitalized area of Atlanta, unbelievable Kroger facility. We're looking forward to being there for Before the Hedges presented by Kroger next week. So we will look forward to seeing all of you there for that. Come on by and see us, please. It's going to be a lot of fun. With all that in mind, let's get ready to do our weekly six-pack. As Jeff, the floor is yours to stump us with some trivia questions.
Brandon, normally these are thematic. Normally these are contingent on the opponent. But this next opponent, Brandon, because it is the next opponent, Brandon, this matchup is so nice. We have to focus our six-packs on the Gators twice.
There you go. I like it.
Florida Gators, we've got a bevy fountain, waterfalls of information about Florida recruiting as it compares to Georgia recruiting. I know this will be a fun exercise for you.
I'm looking forward to it.
Let's hit it. Question number 1. How many times this decade has Florida had a higher rated recruiting class than Georgia?
So that goes back to 2010. Muschamp era, pretty good recruiting going on at UGA. Pretty good recruiting going on at Florida.
Have to harken back to 2010, which is considered by the Gators the greatest recruiting of the class of the modern era.
No, you're right. I'm gonna say it's D4. D4. Obviously, all that's front end of the decade. Actually, I'm gonna change my answer. I'm gonna say C3. I'm going to say C3.
C3 PA.
Tal Whitaker says A. Devin Glenn says B. Nicholas King says throw your A's up. Shane Bentley going to say A there as well. Beginning part of the decade when Muschamp was still there, that was a good recruiting program.
Urban Meyer too, sir.
Sure.
You said Muschamp.
Right. In 11, 12, in the beginning part of this decade, people knew that Urban Meyer was a good recruiter. Muschamp was a very good recruiter in the years that followed that. So I'm going to say 3.
Brendan had a little bit of waffling, a little bit of flip action.
Yeah.
He almost recorded an answer for 4. He checked down, threw it out in the flats to the answer column for C. And you got that one right,
there
sir.
You go.
You had a late read on that.
There
You were
you go,
like,
yeah.
oh, I'm going to do this receiver, and then
Yeah.
like, nope, dump it to Swift in the flat.
It's very easy to forget how well Florida used to recruit. Very easy to forget. Although they certainly came back in kind of a bigger way with the 2019 recruiting class, making it into the top 10 there on that after some pretty lean years from Jim McElwain.
Very lean year. So Brandon currently is 1 for 1. That's 3 times in this decade that Florida Gators have had a better recruiting class than everyone's Georgia Bulldogs right here. Number 2, Brandon off to a 1 for 1 start. How many times has Florida finished with a top 10 recruiting class this decade? Not top 30, not top 20, not top 15, but top 10 recruiting class, which is where Florida should be if Barney Fife is their head coach doing the recruiting.
So 19 for sure. Did they make it an 18 composite, like top 10? I would say that like 10, 11, 12, that's a top 10 class virtually every year back in that time. I'm gonna say C5. The honest truth is I don't know if they were a top 10 class in 2018 or not. I'm gonna say it's C5. C5.
5. How many times has Florida finished with a top 10 recruiting class this decade?
Kent Caldwell says B. Chadwick Ivory says B. Zach Smith says B. Gary Strickland says C. I feel like 3 is too few. If you put 4, you might could have gotten me to say 4. I feel like 3 is too few, though, just given what was going on at the beginning of the decade, and you've got at least 1 from last year. I feel like given that choice, it's got to be C5.
There you go, guys. Brandon's contemplation every week during his
Jason Huggins agrees with me.
During his 6-pack is brought to you by those folks at Kroger. When you're contemplating the type of Halloween candy you want to get, we've already mentioned whatchamacallits.
Yeah.
We've already mentioned a lot of other savory favorites like Twix. Brandon, your correct answer is 5.
There are plenty of questions I get wrong, but these questions I usually get right.
Brandon, 2 for 2. When it comes to Florida, that's your lane, right, sir?
But anything involving some of this recruiting stuff, I typically do pretty well with these.
Typically does pretty well. Number 3, Brandon, another offshoot of some of the same stuff we're kicking around right now. Number 3, how many times has Florida finished with a top 10 recruiting class since 2015?
So I told you before, I can't quite remember what happened in 2018, but we know that in 3 years of McElwain, he didn't have a top 10 class in any of those years. So it just comes down to, is it 1 or is it 2? Because I can't remember 2018. I'm going to say it was 1. I'm going to say that Mullen just missed the top 10 in 2018, his first class at Florida. I'm going to say the only top 10 class they've had in the last half decade was 2019.
2019. And where was that rated, Brandon? What was that?
So it's just 1 top 10 class, so whatever letter that is. I'm sure it wasn't chronological. It wasn't chronological order. Okay.
Survey says?
B1 for me.
Correct answer, B1.
There you go.
Folks, this is a very rare 3-0 start for Brandon.
No talking during a no-hitter.
No talking during a no-hitter. He is currently 3-0.
Tram Duck says, I want to ace this one because you got to keep up with the enemy. That's very true, Tram. You got to keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Very true.
If this was Twitter right now, it would be trending. Brandon Adams is currently 3 for 3 on his 6-pack trivia.
No talking during a no-hitter.
Sometimes we just like to have fun, guys. We apologize. Number 4. What does the ratio of 5-star signees look like between Florida and Georgia this
full decade?
We ramped up some degree of difficulty on this one a little bit.
Yeah, this is going to be a little harder for me. So for the full decade, 13 seems low for Florida. 20 seems about right. Let me say, actually, I don't know the answer to this one. I'm going to say A, 33 to 13.
Let's look at that one more time. Would that be
I don't know the answer to this.
Would that be a welcome final score in whatever bank
I'd take it.
Financial entity it's called these days?
I'd take it. I'd take it for sure.
In that stadium, and can we break the news whether or not that Eddie will be in your suitcase?
You better believe he will be.
Eddie will be in the suitcase.
You better believe he will be. 33 to 13. I don't know the answer to this.
Brandon, you got some folks thinking that you're Googling these answers already, that you're coming up with them. That's why your start is so great. But guys, guess what? Give me 4. Brandon is currently 4.
How about that?
For 4.
Yeah. That's just an educated guess. I did not know the answer to that.
So our folks in the control room, they've got their hats on backwards. They've got their rally caps on. They are not cheering any more sunflower seeds until Brandon can close the deal.
Here we go.
Folks,
Matthew McGahee gave me a wow. So did Timothy Burrell also. I don't know if that means y'all just think I'm that dumb or if you're that happy for me. I can't decide which one that it is.
Is there anyone else, jump in on the feed, is there anyone else in the known universe that is currently 4 for 4 right there, a lead dog with Brandon Adams?
Chris Bram even gives me a whoa. So people are pretty happy right now. Let's see if I can keep it going.
5 for 5.
All right.
When was the last class that Florida signed a 5-star recruit?
Okay, this is going to be tough. So, not 19, 18, 17, 16. I'm not going to say it's 15 either. 2014. Actually, when did Antonius Clayton sign? Is that 14 or is that 15? He's at Tech now. So let me say.
Clayton wasn't a 5-star, by the way.
Was it Antonius Clayton on the 5-star?
He was not a 5-star.
Well, then let me not say that then. Can I see the years one more time? I'm going to say 2013 B. I'm going to take it back. I'm going to take it back to then and say 2013 B.
Folks, everybody all across the universe right now, can we put those fingers up? Can we put those cross your fingers up?
Come on.
For Brandon. Survey says buzzer bell. Buzzer.
Dadgummit.
That was Martez Ivey, who did not get drafted.
Martez Ivey, that's right. They played him at guard, and then he moved to tackle.
And then it was also Van Jefferson, or C.C. Jefferson, the defensive end.
Yeah, Van was transferred.
Also did not get drafted. Van's the transfer wide receiver from Wyoming. Brandon, much like Georgia.
Disappointing.
You take a loss.
But you know what? Going to bounce back in a big way right here. Get the last one right.
And all that matters is the last game, Brandon. The last question. Everybody's having fun with this. Number 6, Brandon. And you almost had it, man, because this is the equivalent of a free space this week. This was the bingo free space. What is the preferred area of the field where Georgia plays much better against Off University this week? Obviously, Off University is the opponent. What is the preferred area, Brandon, you want to see Georgia play better? James Cook with 8 touches. The tight ends, maybe this is the Arik Gilbert edition, go for 7 catches, 145 yards, and 3 touchdowns. C, Dominic Blaylock with 200 all-purpose yards, return and receiving yards. Or D, the receivers create 3.5 yards of separation per pass play.
So I'm tempted to say James Cook because I'd love to see him getting more involved. I think Georgia needs his speed. But I'm going to go with Dominic Blaylock here because I think that for a field position game, which Georgia-Florida is going to be, you love the idea of getting him going in the punt return game, getting a chance to set up some returns for him, and I do think he's going to be a valuable weapon in the passing game as well. So my answer to this one's going to be Dominic Blaylock. Momentum says, by the way, he used this one to avoid the shutout. So Mo happy to have question 6 being what it is. Thomas Gwen also says all of the above, which is also a very good answer here as well.
See, Chris Brenneman, I knew Brennan, if he could just get past 5. If he could just get past Alabama number 5.
Martez Ivey, I should have remembered. I should have remembered Martez Ivey.
If he could have gotten past 5, which is the Notre Dame game, the Alabama game, where you would have had Alabama in the national championship. You'd have had green grass, Brandon.
I should have remembered that.
But anybody, you could pick your own. It's very interesting to see what everybody's viewpoints are out there. Brandon actually went with a big game from Dominic Blaylock as the punt returner.
I'm ready to see him break out in a big way, and I think it could happen.
Folks, my answer, if we had to pick one, everybody can pick one. Everybody gets them right. But my answer, in a tight end frame of mind this week, especially after some of those comments that Theo Johnson made while he's coming off of his Penn State official visit and how whiteout was great and everything else like that, my answer would be the tight ends. Georgia, wonder what would have happened with a lot of things if Georgia would have shown an incredible 7 catches, 140 yards, 3 touchdowns game at tight end. Out of all those things, I think the least likely answer, the least probable answer for me would be the tight ends, and that's why I chose that one.
So let's get ready to wrap up here. Of course, we'd like to close out the show with a little hurry up. That means your questions and comments, as many as we can squeeze in. We're running a little late today, so let's put 3 minutes on the clock. We'll knock out as many as we can here over the course of the next 3 minutes. Matthew McGahee says Georgia going to hurt those Gators. Jeff, I am excited about it. I've been talking about it all week long. I'm already in rivalry mindset, rivalry mode. Can't wait for this one coming up 2 Saturdays from now.
Yeah, Georgia's going to start practicing. I think they turn their attention to Florida tomorrow on the practice field, getting ready for that one. Another one on the banks of the St. James.
Yeah. No doubt about that. YouTube comments. Nathan Moore says, who would be your top 3 ranking for quarterbacks in college? I don't know who the top 3 is, but certainly Georgia's recruited that position. Now it's looking forward to filling in those gaps beyond Carson Beck in 2020, right?
Yeah, top 3 rankings. Is he talking about college football? If he's talking about college football, you got to go Burrow right now as your number 1 guy, especially the way he's playing. And the way that some of the other guys are playing. I think the name Fields, I think the name Tonga Vailoa, I think the name Hurts. They have to jump in there.
Dustin Adams says, do you think that Kirby Smart's going to have Georgia ready for that Florida showdown?
Yes. I mean, folks, you got to remember this. It's finally the next game, so everybody can focus on this and talk about this. But this is, in 2019 and going forward, this is the, can I say it? Everybody calls the Tech game clean old-fashioned hate. Well, I think this one is toxic, pure, scalding hot hate between Georgia and Florida.
No, it's very intense right now. Scott Peterson bringing up the idea of separation of the wide receivers. Jeff, I thought Terrence Edwards was very interesting on our program last week, Dog Nation Daily, talking about the definition of separation not being 5 yards necessarily. It's about getting a yard, getting a step, and getting hands with the quarterback and see them to catch the football. I thought Terrence had some great things to say about that last week when he was with us on the program.
Terrence was the master of all things, and he's one of those guys that has trained Arik Gilbert for years and years and years. And when you look at Arik Gilbert and the way he runs that route tree from A to Z, from the hitch all the way up to the go route, I mean, he's a guy that is in the 99th percentile of high school route runners, regardless of if you're talking tight end or receiver.
James Bryant asked about possible tweaks to the offense. Do you think anything looks different in Jacksonville coming up in a couple of weeks?
Going to see a lot more runs to the outside, including Florida's speed. You want to see how those Gators that are all supposed to be ready and fat and happy and healthy and ready to take on Georgia in that game and how that thing's going to go. I think tweaks to the offense would probably mean a lot more touches and a lot more targets for guys like Dominic Blaylock and George Pickens.
I like this from Chuck Pearson. He says it's going to be the shortest post-game handshake in college football after the game between Mullen and Smart. I think that's probably pretty well said. And I like what John Stinchcomb said in our program this week. And Stinch is as classy a guy as it comes. But when it comes to the good-natured rivalry that Georgia and Florida have, you don't have to apologize for not liking the other team in a sporting sense here. That these two teams are going to treat this like a real rivalry. The player's going to play that way. Coach is going to coach that way. Certainly fans going to behave that way. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah,
you don't have to pretend to like everybody.
But it's funny, Georgia has been eerily quiet in this whole let's create something for folks to write about or let's stir up things. Remember, it seemed like Florida, remember that spring game attendance number that they threw out there? And nobody's going to comment. Nobody's going to bring those up. But I think that stuff is the type of stuff that everybody thinks back to because this is the week, this is the series, this is now the time when you can kind of dish some of that out at an opponent.
The clock started over again. Stephen Burton says I should be Larry Munson for Halloween. The problem with being Munson is there's not a really obvious visual way to be Munson. Last year you were Irk Russell for Halloween. Everybody knows that when you get the ball ahead. It's hard to be Munson for Halloween, though. You know what I'm saying? You can't really put on a costume to have people know that's who you are, necessarily.
Got to get some thick glasses on, Brandon, maybe a fishing hat, maybe a button down and a tie. You got to have a cigar, of course, Brandon. One of these days, you're gonna pull a Munson and be on a post-game show smoking a cigar like all those.
I wouldn't mind that.
Like all those Alabama, Tennessee rivals do.
Would not mind that whatsoever. Also, don't mind the fact that all of you have been with us here today. In fact, I'm thrilled about it. Thanks for being a part of Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. We got live video coverage of the Arik Gilbert announcement coming up in about 2 hours' time or so. So we'll look forward to having you there as a part of that with all of us. Jeff Sintel will be on hand for that. And then tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., we'll be back on Dog Nation Daily to talk about whatever the announcement is, whatever the decision is. We'll react to that and everything else as we get ready for the cocktail party 2 Saturdays from now. Thanks for being with us on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. You'll have a great afternoon, everybody.